Thank you for listening to another episode of Remake Rewind. This is Mike. As always, I've got my buddy Alex. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. Hanging in there.
Good.
I'm really nervous about this election coming up. Because we're in California and there's a recall election, and it actually has some nationwide ramifications. So anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to, this is what we should do to like transition into our what we do. You know, every episode I like to think we have a new listener. So what we do here is we talk about movies that have been remade or rebooted, talk about the original, talk about the new one, and then just try to decide if the new one should have been made or if it should have or if it's done anything to kind of further cinematic history, like if it was worthwhile kind of thing. But I think every week we should just like talk about something completely unrelated and be like, that's not why we're here. This is why we're here. And use that as a transition into describing the podcast.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes we have a conversation before we hit record, and then for whatever reason, we kind of continue the conversation after recording.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of transitions. I don't know.
They call that
like
in
to have
media
fun
res.
Yeah, we like to have fun here.
We do like to
try. But this one I'm actually pretty excited to talk about. I know when I joked about doing this topic 2 or 3 weeks ago, I sent you like an advertisement on Instagram or something. And you're like, no, God, please don't make me do it. And then like over the course of like 3-4 weeks, we've kind of like joked about it. And we've kind of got excited about this episode. So
yeah, I went in with rock bottom expectations. Like I thought that this would be fun. This would be a fun short episode. It'd probably still be short, but I thought it'd be fun to like come in and just kind of have a laugh and whatever, you know, so bad it's so good, it's good kind of thing. And I mean, these are not like good movies, but the old one kind of holds up. And I did not have as bad of a time watching the new one as I thought I was going to.
Right. So without further ado, what we covered is She's All That, the 1999 classic, and then the remake that literally just came out a couple days ago. This dropped on Friday as of recording, just 3 days ago. And it's He's All That, the gender-swapped remake that went straight to Netflix. And yeah, I knew exactly what to expect with She's All That. We covered it on Ruined My Childhood like 2 or 3 years ago. So it hasn't been too long since I watched it. It's not something I frequently watch, but I probably watch this movie every 5 years or so. So I knew exactly what to expect. He's All That, I expected it just to be awful. And for the most part, it was exactly what my expectations were, just to say at the beginning. But I have some surprisingly positive things to say about the movie. There are a few things that I think it did improve on, you know, in the 20 years. So I'm actually kind of excited to talk about both of these movies.
Yeah, me too. Let's dive into it.
All right, bud. Can you give our listeners a kind of a synopsis for this one?
Yeah, I think I can boil the whole thing down pretty well. Let me all right. It's Pygmalion. Or My Fair Lady.
Yep, pretty much.
No, this is a tale about hotshot soccer player, class president, and heartthrob Zach, played by Freddie Prinze Jr., who gets dumped by his hot and popular girlfriend Taylor weeks before prom. Zach bets his friends that he can make any girl in the school not only popular, but also dethrone Taylor as prom queen. What he didn't expect was to find a new passion and love with the super ugly wet blanket artist Lainey, played by the obviously attractive Rachel Leigh Cook. I wasn't expecting the word ugly in there.
I always try to throw you with something in the synopses that I write.
The audience is getting a look behind the curtain here. I might not have read that synopsis before. Before I write it.
To be fair, I always write, like I write some show notes for us to kind of give us a structure, or you know, just little things that we were going to have to refer to, like the name of the actors or what characters they played. And 9 times out of 10, depending on the movie, we do one or the other. Like we do the actors or we do the characters. Like if the character names aren't memorable, we're just going to use the actors. But I always like to throw something in there just to kind of throw him off when he's reading a synopsis.
Thank you. Well, listen, occasionally I write the synopses too. Next time I'm going to get you. I think that's funny that you put it in there though, because that was one of my points about both of these movies is like, and it's sort of a passable offense or forgivable offense in 1997 or whatever. But like at no point would any real person believe that Rachel Leigh Cook's character in She's All That is ugly. Like,
Right.
she's clearly gorgeous.
Yeah.
And in the new one, that's kind of the same thing. Like, well, we'll get to it, but there's no way that that dude Tanner is perceived as being an ugly, unfit guy.
Like, and I mean, we'll get into that, but even this one, because of her personality and her frumpy clothing, and you know, maybe she passed by unnoticed. Like the writers of the film even said, this is something you kind of just have to, in cinema, believe. Like, you just have to believe this. And I mean, it's a trope. It's not just this movie. You know, you have the Princess Diaries and everything. There's so many. Anne Hathaway is obviously super gorgeous, and they, you know, they give her curly hair so she's ugly. Like, that's what they do in movies, is curly hair's ugly, straight hair's pretty. But yeah, that's the biggest thing knock against this movie. The very obvious Rachel Leigh Cook being gorgeous is not somebody that guys realize are cute. You know, every school, I don't want to say that. I actually want to ask you a couple questions. You're a couple years older than me, not outrageously older than me, but a few years older than me. So
take it easy there, Sonny.
Maybe your high school experience is different than mine. But one of the things that I found the hardest to believe in this movie is Freddie Prinze Jr. Plays Zach, and at the beginning of the movie, you see him like pulling up in his like really nice truck, and it says Mr. Prez on it because he's the class president. But he's also the third highest GPA or fourth highest GPA of the school, and he's captain of the soccer team, and he's the most popular guy.
And he seemingly has really a lot of free time to remake this girl.
Right. And everybody likes him. Like, as he's walking down the hall, he says like, "Hey, Connie," and she like, "Oh my God, he knows my name. That's not your name though." And then he does that with a couple of guys too, and everything. So like, just talking to him, people just like lose their minds.
Yeah. And
then same thing with Taylor, his girlfriend. That wasn't a thing in my high school. Was that a thing in your high school, that there was somebody that was just everybody wanted to be? And
yeah, I mean, the unbelievable part to me is that he's also class president. I think the class presidents in my school were not like jocks. That was its own sort of track, and they might have been popular. They might have hung out with those people, but it was not the same people. The jocks were like their own thing.
You'd be the more preppy people, but still the popular crowd.
Yeah, and also just like not kind, frankly.
Yeah.
I'm sure there were some nice people at my high school that played sports, but the popular, like the quarterback of the team or whatever, was not as nice of a guy as Freddie Prinze Jr. is.
And maybe my school's unique because, now granted, my school has some assholes. My school is the high school that got really famous for some white kids wearing USA flags on Cinco de Mayo, purposely trying to pick fights, and then they ended up on Good Morning America. So that's my school. They had to ban flags outright at my high school.
My high school is where they filmed Dangerous Minds.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
But my high school didn't really have that weird class system that's like stereotypical in movies of like, here are the jocks, and then here are your regular kids, and then the nerds kind of thing. My school was like all pretty mixed, but also like our football team wasn't good until my senior year. So like the best team at the school was our water polo team and our girls soccer team and our field hockey team. Mm-hmm. So like the sports that don't get a ton of attention pretty much anywhere else were the best.
Right. And
best teams at my school.
And Zach was a soccer player, so maybe that's why their system is a little different.
Yeah, but it's we didn't have, I can't think of, obviously there were very attractive girls at my school that a lot of people liked, but I can't think of that one it girl or that one it boy at my school that everybody was in love with. Like, that didn't exist in my school.
It existed at my school, but it wasn't like one person. Which is probably true of the school in this movie, and they just didn't really get into it because that's not, you just accept that he's the popular guy,
right? But I mean,
there was like
most high school movies have that set up where there's like the it girl and the it guy,
sure,
and they're not normally nice. Like, by most of the movies, it turns out they're assholes, and really the best friend is the one they should have gone after. But that's still a thing. Like, it don't mesh with that because that was never a thing in any of my schools.
I mean, there was a group of popular people at my school. I mean, I can think of like the central 3 or 4 people, so it doesn't feel like it's that far off from the truth. Now,
the Lainey kind of character, there were definitely people in my school who were like, class pride, team sports, like, that's definitely a thing.
Like Lainey, the Rachel Leigh Cook character?
Yeah.
Oh, you're saying, like, fuck that.
Like the antisocial,
yeah.
like, I don't give a shit about.
I'm Lainey.
Yeah. So that's definitely a thing. So I think that's funny that like that's a real thing. But to get into this movie's iconic, obviously. This was one of the biggest movies of '99. This only cost like $11 million. It made like 134 worldwide, so it made a ton of money. Every girl I was in fifth or sixth grade when this came out. I remember every girl had Freddie Prinze Jr. taped to their desk and whatnot, and like Sixpence None the Richer, that Kiss Me song, her going down the stairs,
Yep.
The hacky sack scene, like
that's such a good example of a song from a soundtrack and the movie that it's on the soundtrack of, like working together to push each other into fucking to like transcend
the stratosphere
pop culture.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I think that song is not responsible for the movie being as big as it is, and the movie is not responsible for the song, but they are, they helped each other out.
Yeah.
What am I trying to say?
It's like when you have multiple speakers, and the signals collide to kind of push it and enhance. It's that.
Yeah.
My AV nerd came out. But yeah, I mean, like I said, several iconic things. The Fatboy Slim dance at the end of the movie, like all these classic scenes. This movie essentially has been remade twice. Between when you look at Not Another Teen Movie, some of the dialogue is lifted directly from this.
Yeah,
it follows the plot almost like exactly. And then you have the 2020.
My first note is that Not Another Teen Movie is so similar to this. I didn't realize how similar it was.
It's almost exactly the same.
I always think about Not Another Teen Movie being, like any other of those spoof movies that were really popular in the late 90s, early 2000s, and they all sort of like follow the general plot of the main movie that they're spoofing. But it feels like Not Another Teen Movie is more similar to this than the other ones.
It's just like a raunchier, dumber version of the movie.
Yeah. Which is also funny because I feel like, and this is another one of the main differences between she and he, is that I feel like She's All That is kind of in on its own joke. Like it's almost, it's more similar to Not Another Teen Movie in that way. Like it's kind of spoofing teenage culture, like teenage movies.
Well, and then it
has
movies. One of the things that going back, and every time I watch this, I forget about it. But there are two scenes that I think are really interesting that are way better than this movie actually is. Mm-hmm. And I think it's pretty unique. But there's two kind of like dreamlike sequences. There's one towards the beginning that's a flashback where Taylor's breaking up with Zach, and he's like, "Oh, why?" And she's like explaining like, "Oh, on spring break," and you just see them talking, and it's close-up shot, and you just see these three people walk by, and then the camera follows those three people, and all of a sudden they're in spring break, and then
it's like a Gondry movie.
Yeah, and then she's telling the story of what happened and how she met Mathew Lillard's character, who was a pseudo celebrity from a reality show. Yeah. But as they're talking, when Zach has a follow-up question, Freddie Prinze Jr. shows up in his like high school jock clothing at the spring break, and he's like walking around the scene being like, "Oh, what's this? What's that?" And that's like a pretty cerebral kind of scene for this movie.
Yeah. That was in my notes too. The transition when she's telling him about what happened at spring break, like that really caught my attention. That was crazy.
Right. And then you look at the end when he's starting to feel upset about what's going on. He's watching The Real World, and he falls asleep, and then obviously The Real World comes to life and incorporates his friends and whatnot, kind of thing. And then he like wakes up and he's perfectly back in his room. Like really interesting kind of ways to move the plot forward and show his guilt in a visual way. And it's just like both of these things are way more cerebral than the rest of this movie.
Yeah, I agree. Not entirely related, but speaking of things being better in this movie than they have any right being, is Kevin Pollak. Really good casting.
You know why he did this movie?
Why's that?
Because he saw Freddie Prinze Jr. in some other movie or play and thought, man, this kid has a lot of charisma. I want to work with him. So he signed on for it specifically to work with Freddie Prinze.
How funny.
Yeah.
He's got a little speech at the end to Rachel Leigh Cook. And it's actually similar to He's All That, and we'll get to that later. But it's like one of the best parts of the movie.
Yeah. And no, I absolutely agree. And what I love the dad character because he really reminds me of my grandfather. So my grandfather watching Jeopardy, he would always so the father in this movie, every time he answers every Jeopardy question just way wrong and just absolute just 100% confidence in his answer, and he's wrong, and then he doesn't even flinch when he's wrong. Like, it just moves on to the next question. But my grandpa watching Jeopardy, every time they would ask a person or a question about a person, he'd be like, "Who's Cameron Irvin?" Every single time. So like,
well, that's smart. One time it's going to be right, and he'll seem brilliant. Isn't there a moment in this movie where the late Paul Walker tells Lainey that Rachel Leigh Cook that she has weird boobs, or he says that about her to somebody else?
R.I.P. Paul Walker.
That's funny.
No, he says she has like nice boobs when she's on the beach.
I wrote down weird boobs.
No, he called him like a weird name, but no, he said that he's like, "Oh, look at that. She actually has like a pretty like nice chi-chis or something." Like he says it's something that's like not a common way that teenagers would describe boobs.
I guess I'm not, I'm stating the obvious here, but like this movie's pretty sexist. And I don't like the movie itself is not necessarily sexist, but the characters like Paul Walker is like very sexist.
Oh, Paul Walker definitely is. So he
like doesn't let up.
He doesn't. He's an asshole. He's a borderline sociopath in this movie.
Yo, did you notice how often he's just walking up to women, grabbing them?
Yeah, like every time. And then when he's describing Taylor at the beginning of the movie, when like Paul Walker's like, "Oh, fuck her. She's not a big deal. Like I can get another girl." And the guy's like, "Spare me this shit about she's replaceable. She's an institution. Every guy wants to be with her. Every guy wants to be with her. Every girl wants to be her. She's you with tits." Like she like just completely, she can't be her own identity. She has to be his identity.
Right.
But better because she has boobs and the objectify. Yeah, like everything is like on the surface like that.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of somebody being somebody with tits, one of my notes is that Rachel Leigh Cook is like Superman with tits, in the sense that, let me finish, when she takes off her glasses, people realize how beautiful she is. But when she puts on her glasses, it's like she's a totally different person.
Yeah.
See? I made it work.
There you go.
I made it work.
Some of the other things that I thought were funny about this movie is like how many actors that went on to be like pretty big almost right after this. Like
it's so funny that Scarlett and I are watching Buffy right now because Sarah Michelle Gellar came on and we were both like, "Whoa!"
Well, this was filmed at the same school.
Yeah, in my headcanon, it takes place in the same universe.
Yeah,
I feel like they take place in the same universe, and she was playing Buffy in that cameo. And like when we're watching She's All That. It's just like one of the weeks or the days where like shit doesn't go down, or it's the part of the school where nobody died. Right.
But yeah, that was one of the things I can bring up. Her, Milo Ventimiglia. I can never remember how to pronounce his last name. Yeah, he's in this. He's like one of the JV, soccer players that, going back to my point at the beginning of the movie, or the beginning of our conversation about like how this guy is like a god. Throughout the movie, he just gets people to do things for him. He just gets the JV soccer team to come and clean Lainey's house so she can go on a date with him, kind of thing. Like it's weird. But going back to like your kind of your sexist comment about the movie, I feel like even Zach's relationship with Lainey is pretty problematic because like obviously the way it starts out is very sexist and whatnot. But he's our hero and he's supposed to grow and become likable and blah 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 blah. But he's very aggressive and like is kind of in the wrong to be following and stalking her. Like he really is just kind of stalking her until she like just kind of like lets him in because she's just like giving up.
Yeah, and I feel like people will sometimes criticize lead characters for doing something uncouth in the first half of the movie or whatever. And frequently my response to that is, well, that's their arc though. You're supposed to, maybe not like a part of them, and they're supposed to do something wrong in the beginning of the movie so that they can be redeemed later on. But you're right to point that out because that's never dealt with
Right.
He just is weird and aggressive. Like he goes to her work and interrupts her while she's helping a customer so that he can like badger her until she says yes to a date or whatever.
Well, even her friend, Foggy Nelson from Daredevil, is like doesn't listen to what she says. And just like kind of forces him on her.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to another point that I had about this movie. Zach like doesn't really change enough to earn the moment where he like gets Lainey back or right before the prom.
No,
it feels like he doesn't it's very soft. Like he doesn't really get enlightened or learn anything. You know what I mean?
No, like he just feels bad, but it's like she forgives him because he shows up at her house at the end of the movie. Like,
yeah.
Oh, the other thing that's weird is so like this character, like you said, he can be a little unlikable at the beginning because that's the whole point of the movie. Is
right. He has to have a flaw. Right. He has to have a flaw because the point of the movie is
exactly. But like this one, to make him more likable, and she kind of calls him out on this, like he's complaining that he has too many options. Like, I have all this pressure, I need to pick a good school, and my dad's successful, and I don't know what I'm gonna do, like, because my dad. And she's just like, oh, you know, boo-hoo, the rich guy gets to go anywhere, and he's kind of like, check your privilege kind of thing.
Right.
And then he just decides that he's gonna go do her thing. Like he gets called up on stage and does some performance art, which I think is a great scene, the hacky sack scene.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the movie, he kind of confronts his dad, and even his dad's like, dude, I just want what's best for you. Like, I just want you to go to college, and you're pissing it away by just letting all these letters lapse.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So it turns out like this guy was completely wrong about his life. And then he just decides, well, I'm going to go into performance art now. It's just like, dude, you've done art one time. Like,
yeah, you did one art.
Maybe take a gap year or go to community college and then reapply and figure out what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Because that's a little weird.
I got good news for you. He actually didn't end up going to art school. He went to prison because he flashed a group of people.
That's right. Yeah, that's another thing at the end of the movie. He's just naked. Like, there's no way that would have been allowed. Like, it would have made way more sense if he was in a robe.
Sitting there with his clothes off. Like, how did nobody notice him?
Yeah, it's stupid. There's no way he could have got there. The only way that could have worked was if he was wearing a robe and took it off. And even then, it was like, the only way that would work if you wait until you got up on the stage, take your robe off, and then run around like those guys who flashed Richard Nixon and ran away.
It's weird that you mentioned Foggy Nelson earlier. It's weird that he, at the end of the movie at prom or whatever, that he didn't try to call Lainey.
Right.
Or tell Lainey. Sorry. He couldn't call her.
Well, granted, this is 1999. There's
no
cell phones.
I mixed up my points. What I meant to say was, it's weird that he didn't go tell Lainey about Paul Walker's plan.
Right.
He went to tell Zach about Paul Walker's plan. And like Lainey was right there. He could have just yelled Lainey's name instead of Zach's. My other point was going to be this whole thing would have been, resolved if Foggy had a cell phone and just called her or texted her.
Right. But no, you're right though. Like that is kind of problematic for Foggy to do
He's
that.
Like,
when
not
it's
a
like,
great friend.
Yeah, it's like he forces her into this weird situation and like bullies. Now, granted, she grows and becomes a better person, and her art gets better, and her teacher is like, "This is what I've been trying to get out of you for 4 years," kind of thing. So yeah, she definitely became a better person by being popular and whatnot. But yeah, it's just like only men could solve her problems. That's why Foggy went to Zach.
Well, yeah, and this whole movie could have been avoided if they let Freddie be sad for like literally an hour. Like he couldn't deal with his emotions, and Paul Walker didn't know how to be a shoulder for his friend to cry on. So they ended up making this horrible bet.
I'll just tease this. I'll tease this now. But like one of the things that I thought the newer movie did better was like the background behind the bet. Because like with this one, you're absolutely right that it didn't necessarily seem like an organic place to go immediately. And like this one, like Paul Walker was just kind of like weird the whole movie. It's like every time he saw he saw Zach with Lainey, he was always like kind of pissed off. And it's just like, dude, what did you expect? And then he doesn't really hint at the bet until he just decides to be like a fucking sociopath. And he's just like, okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to her and say, oh, Zach's not going to ask you out to the prom. Like he's going to go back with the girlfriend. And then he plays up this weird, like he shows up at her house. First he shows up at her work and asks her to prom. And she's like, no. And then he shows up at her house all dressed up. And Lainey's thinking it's Zach, but it's actually Paul Walker. And Paul Walker is like, you can go to the prom with me. You don't even have to change. You can go in that, that art schmuck outfit, and I don't even care. But I didn't ask anybody else on just the 1% chance you'd say yes. Like, he puts on this like really fucked up persona.
Yeah.
I think we can have a really great time. And then he gets to the prom. He's just like, yeah, I'm totally going to fuck her kind of mentality.
Yeah.
And then
he's a maniac.
Yeah. And then like books a hotel room and everything. Like, it's pretty fucking terrible. Like, he's a fucking sociopath. And then like the only kind of scene that we get to show this is there's a point in the locker room where he's giving Zach shit about the bet, like hanging out with Lainey.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he's just like, fuck you, Zach, you're not God. Like, there are other people here that matter too. And it's just like, dude, this seems to have come out of nowhere. Like, everybody's looking at him like, dude, that's your best friend.
I wonder what his home life is like.
Right. Super weird. But the other thing, that this movie's big for, and, we want to start wrapping this one up, but they get to the prom, and this is one of the things that's nonsensical, but it's just fun. But they all do this group dance to Fatboy Slim's Rockefeller Skank. And the way they kind of explain it in the movie is Usher's at this movie. And he's just like, hey, everyone, do that dance move I showed you. Yeah. Because he's the DJ at his own dance. And yeah, it's a fun scene and another iconic scene, but and that got replicated in the new one, not as well. But yeah, this movie's just kind of a mess, and it's weird, but for some reason it worked. And I don't know if you know this, but did you know M. Night Shyamalan was involved in this film?
I did.
Yeah. So over the years, it's gone back and forth. He's always claimed that he was a ghostwriter on this. The studio confirmed it. The writer, R. Lee Fleming Jr., initially denied it, but then eventually admitted that he came in, did a pass, and then he did R. Lee Fleming did another pass to make it more hip for like the teens, and M. Night Shyamalan just gave it structure. But there was some like beef in like Reddit forums where R. Lee Fleming Jr. would go and be like, yeah, this scene that nobody likes, that's M. Night Shyamalan kind of thing. Like, he was just trying to say every bad thing was him, and then like mysteriously all the comments disappeared.
Weird.
So yeah, a little bit of controversy on this one, but we didn't talk about Mathew Lillard at all. He's fucking wonderful in this movie.
He's so good.
He's so good.
Yeah, Mathew Lillard is fantastic. And this is another note that I made, similar to Buffy, which again, I'm watching right now, so weird timing. But Jodie Lynn O'Keefe's character, the girlfriend that dumps Zach at the beginning of the movie,
Taylor.
She is way too young for Brock, this guy that's been on the real world. He's at least 21, right?
He would have to be when that was on.
Yeah.
So this is like a couple seasons back.
This guy's 21, 22, dating a 17-year-old. Like,
she could be 18.
Going to the high school.
I give that one a pass because I'm a young person. Like, I graduated high school at 17, but I was one of like 4 people at my school that were like in that late, birthday period, because you have to turn in California, you have to be like 5 before the end of October to go to school. So I started kindergarten when I was 4. But I'm one of few people like that. So I assume she's 18. She also got a tattoo.
Yeah, you can get a tattoo without, but fair enough. But it was just,
it's still creepy.
It's a little weird. Yeah.
Well, then it gets weirder because, and this is another thing that I like. This is a thing that happens in a lot of movies. Christopher Nolan likes to do this in his movies, where there's a line at the beginning of the movie that comes back to bite the asshole character again at the end. So when she breaks up, when Taylor breaks up with Zach at the beginning of the movie, she's like, you didn't think we were going to go to different colleges and still be boyfriend and girlfriend, did you? Oh, you did. That's so cute. And then when Brock breaks up with her, he's like, oh, you didn't think I was still going to be dating you when I go back to the real world All-Stars, did you? Oh, you did. That's so cute. So yeah, I got one of those, comeuppance. But
there's a third one too. I forget who said it, but there's 3.
Yeah, I think Lainey said something similar.
Before we go, I just want to point out one other thing. Did you notice the super weird review mirror shot? So there's the scene where Taylor is in her car after I think Brock has dumped her, and she's talking to Lil Kim and her other best friend. And she's sitting in her car talking to her friends outside, and then her friend like has a tissue in her hand, and Taylor like reaches for it to blow her nose or whatever to wipe her face off. And there's just this, and that's not even the thing I want to talk about, but that is gross because it looks like a used Kleenex. But there's a shot in there where it's like, these have all been like normal, medium shots of each characters. But then there's one shot that is the rear view mirror of her car, like the side view mirror. And you can see Taylor crying in the rear view mirror. And then her friend's hand is on top of the mirror holding the tissue. And that's how she grabs it.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. And like, if you go back and look at that moment, you'll see what I'm talking about. But it like caught me off guard. I had to go back and rewatch and try to figure out why it existed. And
That's
I think
odd.
it must have been reshoots or some line changed or something. But it's very distracting. It's weird.
Weird. That is
Yeah.
weird. I didn't notice that.
Well, that's
Ugh.
it. It was weird to me.
All right. So, Bud.
Oh,
Man.
also, it's super weird that Zach brought a hacky sack to his date.
Yeah, but that scene's fun. We didn't really talk about it, but like, I think that's a really well performed scene.
Yeah.
And like, it shows that he has anxiety and like this false sense of importance that the weight of the world is really on his shoulders. And in reality, we find it by the end of the movie, like nobody really gives a shit like what he does. They just want him to make a decision on what he's going to do with his life.
And it also shows that he's like a smart person. Like he thinks of that whole thing on his feet, and he does it very intentionally. Like it is a sincere representation of his feelings. He's not being artsy for the sake of being artsy.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely. I
that's
agree.
a real thing that he did.
I think it was a great scene.
Yeah.
Like, once again,
it made me like him a lot more.
There's some weird, cerebral, heartfelt moments in this film that you wouldn't expect. And, I just want to tee this up. So the guy who directed this one, Robert Escov, he's only really done TV movies. He did Boys and Girls a year later, which also had Freddie Prinze Jr. And then he did that American Idol movie from Justin to Kelly that came out like right after season 1 of American Idol.
Yeah.
And like, that's it. And that's what he directed. The next one, I'm just going to tee this up, was directed by the same guy who did Freaky Friday with Lindsay Lohan, which is a solid movie that we covered on this podcast. And then he also did Mean Girls, which is a fantastic movie.
Weird.
So I just want to tee that up, and then we're going to talk. But
yeah, okay.
Just think about that. We'll when we're done talking about the second movie, then people, I'm sure, will realize why I brought it up. But anyway, what have you been up to, bud?
Well, sir, I've been rewatching BoJack Horseman.
Nice.
Yeah, that show is so good, man.
It took me like 4 tries to get into it, but once I got into it, like I watched the entire thing in like a week.
You know what's funny? That's brutal, by the way. I have, I was into it immediately. Like I caught it when it first went up, and I was like turning people onto it in the first season. I had like multiple watch parties with friends to get them into it, and I didn't like it any less as it went on, but it became harder to watch because it can be a really heavy show.
It's heartbreaking.
I never watched the last season. That's why I'm rewatching it now, so I can watch the last season.
Oh, okay. It's really good. It's really good up until the end, but it is a gut-wrenching, heartbreaking show at points.
Yeah. So I've been watching that. I haven't watched a whole lot of movies this month, actually. I think I talked about Sword of Trust on the last one.
You did.
We've been watching a lot of TV. We finished The White Lotus.
Yeah, you brought that. You talked about that one pretty heavily last episode too.
Yeah, we finished it, and it was incredible. You still haven't seen it, right?
No, it's on our list. So we just finished up a couple shows. So we're in the process of picking our next like hour-long kind of more dramatic show that we watch.
Word. New Ted Lasso. We've been watching Ted Lasso.
Oh, I've been watching that. Oh my God, this latest episode was so good. One of my favorite episodes of the series so far.
Yeah, same. It's really fantastic. And Ted Lasso this season is so funny because I feel like they're doing such a good job of handling multiple storylines. And
I agree.
The way that they're doing it almost feels like a thriller or a horror movie.
Like, I agree. There's been some twists and turns.
Yeah, and there's like red herrings and like legit like suspense, like drawn out suspense.
I agree. It's so good. You got anything else? Because I've got a few I can shotgun.
Yeah, no, hit it.
So a couple of these I watched last time and forgot to mention it, but I watched Val, the documentary on Amazon about Val Kilmer and him coming to terms with losing his voice, and then him kind of going back over his life because he's always had a camera. He films a little bit every single day of his life.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. Like, he's definitely a bit of a narcissist. But there's a very small section on like the island of Dr. Moreau, and he talks about it. Yeah, which we covered. And he says a few things where I'm like, oh man, this guy really cared. And it, it sounded like the director hated him. It sounded like Marlon Brando hated him. And I'm sure obviously, in those arguments with them, things were a little bit different than what it's on this tape, because obviously he can cherry pick, what he's putting on here. But it made me look at that movie differently, and it made me look at him as a person much, much differently. And it was heartbreaking seeing this guy who was like an iconic person, and he talks about his experience at being Batman and how isolating it was. And it's a great film. I totally recommend it, and it's not super long. It's like an hour and a half.
I might watch that tonight. I've been meaning to watch it. Just haven't gotten around to it.
So that I watched last time. I forgot to mention. I saw Free Guy, and that was way better than I thought it was going to be.
That's awesome.
It was a blast. I had a lot of fun with that.
I really like Ryan Reynolds and this like Reynolds Assance.
Yeah, it's way better than I like. It's exactly what you just said. Is Ryan Reynolds being Ryan Reynolds, but there were some twists and turns and some pretty crazy cameos. Really fun movie. Totally recommend it. We finished I said last episode that I finished the initial run of Twin Peaks. We watched the movie, The Twin Peaks Firewalk with me. Mm-hmm. God, that was a rough watch. I fucking hated it.
Yeah. David
really
Lynch
weird.
Real hit or miss with me, man.
It's super dark. It was way darker than the series, which I knew. But there are certain things like characters kill people in this, and it's a prequel to the series, and like that's not referenced at all in the series.
Yeah.
And then like there's a character who, for like a night, is a prostitute in it, who's like the kind of the good girl of the series, and that's not referred to at all in the series. And it's just like, it was really jarring to see the same characters portrayed drastically different.
Yeah. You're gonna watch the third season?
We will. We're gonna take a little bit of a break, I think, and then get to it in a couple weeks.
You haven't seen it though, right?
No, I haven't seen the 2017 season at all.
Cool.
We finished.
To see what you think.
Yeah, we finished like all the Bob Ross painting stuff. We've been watching that at night, right before bed. Nice. But there was a Bob Ross documentary that came out called Happy Little Accidents, Betrayal, and Greed.
Yeah.
And we waited to watch it until we just happened to finish the series just as this movie came out, but we weren't going to watch it until we finished because we didn't want our like good happy times of Bob Ross to be like ruined. But it ended up not being that gnarly. Like they advertised it's like, we can't even show you a trailer because it'll ruin the mystery. And it was like nothing. It was just like, oh, he's a pretty average dude. But yeah, and then I also at the gym started rewatching Daredevil. So I've watched all of season 1 of Daredevil at the gym over the last 2 weeks. And then last night, not realizing how long it was, we started the movie, the Baz Luhrmann movie Australia at like 10 p.m. And that's a 3-hour movie. But wow. I watched that. It's good.
Nice.
Yep. He's all that. I'm just going to summarize this one really quick. It's the exact same plot as the last one, but gender swapped and with a social media influencer instead of the school president and jock.
That's pretty close. And it's also not nearly as charming.
No. And I think I just want to say at the top, this was not a good movie. My biggest complaint is that Netflix didn't make this movie. Miramax made it. I'm assuming it got shopped around and didn't get picked up because of the pandemic. Netflix got it. I'm really disappointed that Netflix didn't get the streaming rights to the original one. Because the original movie isn't available anywhere for free. You have to rent it. So I had to rent this movie again. But that was a little disappointing that you couldn't watch them both.
Yeah, there must be some weird rights issue because like Dogma is tied up and is never going to see a release.
Right.
Because of weird bullshit. So
I'm a little bummed that like they couldn't capitalize on it by having both in there. Rachel Leigh Cook, just going to say it at the beginning, if you've seen a trailer for this, Rachel Leigh Cook and Mathew Lillard are both in this movie, but they are different roles. Like this is not a sequel. This is, a modern remake of the movie. So for anybody who was hoping that, we might see some characters from the original, nope, just cut it out. It's not going to happen.
But Rachel Leigh Cook, recognizes a song, and Mathew Lillard does a similar dance.
Yeah. Rachel Leigh Cook could still get it. She looks great.
Yeah, she's
beautiful.
Like
how the hell did anybody think she was ugly and frumpy?
Yeah.
Idiots. That whole school is full of idiots.
Hey, speaking of idiots, I just, I put together a quick list of the product placement.
Thank
in
you.
this movie.
Thank you. Thank you. Did
Would
you see
like me to-
my Instagram story?
No.
Oh.
What was it?
Well, basically I did a story of like just some of the most egregious product placements, but go ahead and give me the list and then I'll just kind of key in on a couple scenes.
All right, I got to do my Ace Ventura deep inhale. US, Huda Beauty, TikTok, Aloe, Lilo Beauty, Bunny Venom, Coach, Lexus, Core Water, Sun Chips, Lunchables, New Beverly Cinema. There's a Z rental company that does like honey wagons and shit for film sets, and I can't remember the name. Lucky Charms, Spiritual Gangster, Peloton, Pepsi, more Lexus, Doritos, Pizza Hut, Sennheiser microphones, which we're not using, we're using Samsung's. Yamaha, KFC, Bounty Paper Towels, Yeezys, Ben & Jerry's, Jeans, Beans, Coffee and Pastries, Cheerios, ADT, Security, Garnier, Old Navy, Smart Food, and Apple.
Yep.
And when we're not saying that like these products exist in the movie, in the world of the movie, we're saying that these products were deliberately placed directly in front of the camera,
featured
with the labels facing out, and most of them were mentioned by name by
many
characters.
of them. So pretty much any cosmetic was mentioned by name, held up to the screen for 2 to 3 seconds, with the label pointed out, with Addison Rae saying the name of the product.
Yep.
I would say
Addison Rae, who is a TikTok star, in case anybody didn't know.
And to be fair, she's playing a social media influencer in the movie, and that's something she would do. It's egregious.
She wasn't the one doing it though. Like Rachel Leigh Cook goes, "Oh, look at these Lucky Charms," and then she like holds it up.
But the cosmetic stuff, I give that one a pass. I get it. But no, you're right. The Rachel Leigh Cook one's weird. But I'd say the most egregious is Nisha, who's Cameron, who's the ugly one in this movie, the male Laney.
Yeah.
His friend Nisha is at this party. Like they go to the big party, and
let me get this KFC before I go.
Well, that. But so this is what I put on Instagram. Is the first one. They go out to the party, and the guy's like, she's like, "Oh, why didn't you tell me this was a pool party?" He's like, "Nobody told me." Like super overacting.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Let's just go." And she's like, "No, not before I get this free Pizza Hut." And there's just a table just covered in Pizza Hut, and then there's a KFC bucket. And then later on, as they're going to leave the party, she goes up to the host and is like, "Hey, would it be okay if I get some KFC to go?" And she picks up a bucket and holds it. And then the next scene, they're driving home, and she's just holding the bucket like dead center in frame the entire scene. It's like a 3-minute scene of them talking about like what happened at the party and their relationship and their friendship and everything. And it's just like, there we go. There's just a bucket of chicken the whole time.
Yeah. And I thought of another good example of how like egregious the product placement in this movie is. There's a scene early on where Addison Rae's best friend picks her up and she's in a Lexus, and they're like, this movie takes place in Malibu. It's a bunch of rich kids.
It makes sense.
But they're in Malibu sometimes too. Same shit, whatever.
Yeah, pretty much.
Anyway, she pulls up in this Lexus, and like the logo is fairly prominently placed, but of course she drives a Lexus. You want to have a real car in a movie to lend some authenticity. That one doesn't seem as crazy, so I didn't even write that down when it popped up. I was like, well, I'm gonna give that one a pass. And then like 2 scenes later, Tanner pulls up in his beat up Ford, and he parks in the school parking lot. He has a conversation with Addison Rae there, and in the background are 2 more Lexuses. And I was like, all right, so everybody in this show drives either a beat up old American car or a fucking Lexus.
Yeah.
That's going on the list.
And so just to kind of get through this movie, like I think the Mathew Lillard cameo was like, it was teased the whole movie. Like he is a voice throughout the movie. Like the principal's doing
the DJ.
Yeah, the principal's doing the announcements, and then at the end he shows up in person, and then he's like kind of a dick to the students. It was hilarious, and he was great, but it was kind of like
so many good lines.
Yeah. But just like, God, the hardest part about this movie was the acting. Like Addison Rae, God bless her, she's famous for being famous at this point, and I'm not going to knock that. Like, good for her.
Yeah, and like she's a TikTok star,
actor.
and it's her debut movie. That's fine. Now, Tanner Buchanan, on the other hand, is going to be held to a higher standard because apparently he's an actor.
Yeah, he's in Cobra Kai. He was in like The Fosters. He's done all these like teeny drama stuff.
Yeah, and I watch Cobra Kai. I'm not saying apparently like I haven't seen that. I'm saying apparently he considers himself an actor, and he's already been in a bunch of stuff, so he should be better than he is.
He's probably the worst.
He is just awful.
Yeah. And the thing with his character, there's certain things that I like about this better. So one of the things is I do think certain things are given more room to breathe besides the product placement. But I do think his relationship with Paget, which is a terrible name, but Cameron and Paget's relationship does develop.
I like Paget Brewster.
Maybe, I guess.
No, I'm just saying Paget Brewster has the name Paget, and I like her.
Okay, fair enough.
But this one spells it Padgett, which is weird. So yeah.
So Paget and Cameron have like a longer time to develop the relationship. I do think she does a better job at like finding his interests, and it makes sense that it's an interest that she could possibly share, as opposed to just Freddie Prinze Jr. Oh, I'm into art all of a sudden. Where, her being into horses because he's a big horse guy and he like volunteers at a horse ranch and cleans up and does lessons and everything. It would make sense that, a perceived spoiled rich girl would like want to learn how to ride a horse. Mm-hmm. So I think like that being their kind of like meet cute kind of makes sense. So I liked that, and then there was the lessons, and there was the photos, and all these different like events that they go to seemed more organic and made more sense. So I liked that aspect, but then like other things I didn't like was just like there are certain skills that these people had that were like unexplained. Like Cameron is good with horses, and he's also really good at photography, and he knows martial arts from watching martial arts movies.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Like, that was so bad.
And he's fucking ripped. There's this two scenes, maybe one scene where he takes his shirt off and he looks like a Marvel superhero. Yeah, like,
he's shredded.
You don't look like that from shoveling horse shit.
Maybe. I mean, like agrarian lifestyle, you do tend to be a little bit more muscular and lean. I that's not the most egregious part of this movie. The egregious part of this movie would be that like people don't know that he's like ripped and hot. Like. And this movie doesn't
same
even.
As Laney. It's ridiculous. Yeah. And he also like he dresses really well for who he is. Like he's a punk or whatever, but like he looks good, and he's doing like an established look. He looks like he was into grunge in 1994.
Right. Well, the thing is, like at least Laney, she's wearing paint covered clothes and it's really baggy, and her hair is all messy. Like he's wearing a plaid shirt, slim fit jeans. Yeah. And he's just got long hair and it's brushed back. Like it's not even covering his face, like an emo kid, comb over covering his face. Like, and
his hair is like nice. It's like
it's straight.
It looks like
it's
shampooed.
clean.
I mean, it's clearly a wig, but like it looks like it's shampooed and conditioned.
Yeah, like it's crazy. Like people might think he's a weirdo, but they're like, man, that guy's so hot. He's just weird. But everyone's like, when he shows up to the 20s themed party and he's looking all dapper, like everyone's like, oh my God, like that immediate area was like immediately humid because like everybody was damp for him. Like it was just absurd, like how thirsty everyone was for him. It's just like, dude, he doesn't even look that different. Like his hair is just a little shorter.
Well, let me tell you what the most egregious part of this movie for me is.
Sure.
The whole like catalyst for this movie and for the bet and everything is that Addison Rae's boyfriend cheated on her. And she just happened to be live streaming when she caught him cheating, right?
Mm-hmm.
In what world does a social media sweetheart catch her boyfriend, who's also a celebrity, cheating on her on live stream, and people are not on her side?
Right.
That was insane. Like,
there's no way.
The next day, everyone's making fun of her online. She's losing followers. She loses a sponsorship. That's bullshit. I feel like every single woman who saw that would be on her side.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm sure there would be memes about her. Like, there would be both sides of it. Like, there would be some really fucked up memes, like the Will Smith crying meme. But no, you're right. Like, most people would be on her side because that's just like a fucking terrible thing. Now, this brings me to another thing that I kind of liked about it was, like, in the original movie, Paul Walker, for the most part, seemed like he really was his friend until he wasn't.
Yeah.
And this, like, the friend Alden, played by she's a child actor. She's been around. She's been in like movies with The Rock and everything. But it turns out, was like the orchestra or the orchestrator of all these events.
She knew he was pain.
Yeah, she found out early on, like before events of this movie took place, that Addison Rae's character isn't really rich, and like she basically walks out to these like fancy condos every day so her friends can pick her up in a nice neighborhood kind of thing. But she figured this out, and then she figured out that the boyfriend was cheating and like convinced her to go visit her boyfriend on set when she knew that like she was going to be gonna walk in on her boyfriend fucking somebody else. And then, you know, she sets up the bet, and then she very quickly reveals the bet. Like, she doesn't even play games. Like, she reveals the bet. She also decides to run against her for prom queen kind of thing, and is very, very hostile. So, like, I actually kind of liked that aspect of this movie, is that there was kind of...
That didn't do anything for me.
I don't think it was great, but I think that's a better relationship than the Paul Walker one. Like, it's not just out of nowhere.
I see where you're saying.
Yeah. Like, I don't think this was a good movie by any stretch of the imagination, but I do appreciate that they took some of these swings to try to improve. And then also, like, she didn't come off as stalkery like Freddie Prinze Jr. did. Like, she went to his place and it gave a reason that made sense. Like, I already kind of, you know, teed it up.
She's much more endearing in this movie than
right.
Freddie
And
Prinze's
she
character
genuinely seems to care about him more quickly, and she also feels more conflicted about it pretty much early on. Like, their first kind of little like meet cute when she like throws the horse shit on him, like, you can tell she's kind of like, oh, this guy's kind of a nice guy. Like, she questions her motives throughout the movie way earlier than Freddie Prinze Jr. does.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So, like, you know, there's little things like that that are a lot better. They do try to be, you know, a little bit more woke with this movie. They have somebody who, you know, seems to be gender nonconforming, who ends up winning gets second place for prom queen because Addison Rae gives up the title. You know, there's kind of little things like that. So, you know, this was kind of interesting that it, you know, tried to be inclusive. So, like, there are these pros to this movie, but the problem is just the acting is so bad. The product placement is so bad. And there's even points that I can't remember what it was, but there's a point where there's like a joke, like Addison Rae and Buchanan guy is they have a little moment and they start laughing and it's incredibly forced, but like mid laugh it just cuts, like hard cut to another scene. And it's just like the editing was a bit of a mess. There were scenes that went on a little long.
This movie's also like very ugly to me. It's all so bright, like overlit, and
yeah,
it feels very TV movie. Like there's nothing cinematic about
like
it.
I'm really curious as like how this was perceived. Like, I'm surprised Paramount didn't put it on Paramount Plus to try to get people over, but maybe this wasn't a big enough draw and they were going to get more money by selling it to another streaming site. But like, was this going to be a theatrical release at any point?
I don't know, man. It looks like a TV release.
It's terrible.
And to be clear, like, She's All That, it's a good looking movie.
Yeah. Like, we talked about those two transition scenes that were incredible.
Well, not even that, just like, yes, that. And also, it's lit well, you know, there's depth to it. This looks like, this is all like 2D. It looks like a cartoon.
Yeah, I agree. Oh man, this isn't like, I don't have anything else nice to say about this movie.
I could say something nice. Do you want, let's bag on it a little bit more and then I'll say something nice to finish it.
Sure.
Hold on, let me find a good note. I'm going to skip some of these.
Which Kardashian is in this movie? She was annoying.
Courtney. Yeah, okay. Courtney. She was awful. Oh, that's another product placement. Having her in is basically product placement.
Yeah, I feel that.
The Addison Rae made a lot of like pageant, made a lot of like very dirty puns, like out of place dirty.
Oh yeah, that was another thing that was like in the same the KFC product placement. It's like, thanks for having my ass or taking my back.
Yeah, taking me from behind or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was like 2 anal sex puns among other things. And the whole movie feels like it's aimed towards, you know, kids in high school and like particularly like freshmen and sophomores.
There was an anal joke in the original one too, though.
Well,
to be fair,
there's a lot in this one.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm showing my age a bit, but it seemed a bit much. Oh, dude, did you notice how many shots there were? Speaking of Christopher Nolan, this is like something he would do. There's a bunch of shots that from the back of the truck that was like affixed to the trailer bed.
Yeah, there were a lot of those.
Yeah, and like that was so annoying because it's such a noticeable.
You know why they probably
shot.
did it? So I have a theory now. So at the end of the movie,
I know what you're talking about.
They both decide to take a gap year and go travel Europe and everything. But they're like, doing like motorcycle or car. I can't remember what they were, but they were like in these like valleys and canyons and mountains and whatnot. And they were like Portugal or Spain. I don't remember which country they said, but it was clearly the Malibu Mountains or the Santa Monica Mountains, because it's the same exact place that the Captain America from the 1970s was driving around for 15 minutes in that movie. But it was kind of like the same kind of effect. Like, oh, we're going to show this guy driving for a long time. We're just going to show this fixed thing. Like Captain America had the same thing, just a camera on the outside of the van as it spun around, so you couldn't really see what was going on.
Yeah. Christopher Nolan does it all the time. He does it at least twice in Interstellar. Once is attached to the outside of the spaceship, and the other one is attached to the back of Matthew McConaughey's truck as he's driving through the cornfield.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not like, it's not a crazy thing. Like plenty of movies do this, like you affix a camera to a moving object so it looks like it's stationary and everything else around it is moving. But it just feels so out of place in this movie, and they did it multiple times, and it doesn't like lend anything to
it's because like the truck took almost the entire frame, so there wasn't really like, you couldn't really see what was moving. Like it just didn't do it well.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The shot didn't tell a story. Like it had no purpose in the movie.
Yeah.
There's a scene where he says, there's a scene where they go into his dark room that's built into the basement of his house, and he's showing her like all the pictures that he's taken that he doesn't show anyone, and there's like 15 pictures of this one bassist with a mohawk. Yeah. Like, who is that guy? Why are there so many pictures of this guy? Is he the director's kid or something? And then later in that scene, she's like, you could make a lot of money selling these pictures, and he goes, I don't care about money, you know that. And I was like, that's such a privileged thing for this white dude who lives in the Palisades to say.
Right.
You don't care about money.
There's like a lot of weird things. Like I feel like this is almost like a Tarantino movie, not in quality, but that it takes place in like a surreal kind of like universe. Because like they go to this party, it's a karaoke / pool party, and like the two friends, like the rich friends who are with Pageant. What I like about this one, another thing, I found one more thing I like about it.
Nice.
It's kind of hinted at in the original one. Like you have Gabrielle Union and like two other like preppy friends of Taylor, and Gabrielle Union kind of is like, yeah, I'll hang out with Lainey. She's not like, yay, go Team Lainey or anything like that, but she's like, I'll hang out with her. In this one, there's one of the friends is like with Paget the whole time. Like she's kind of like, dude, like the Paul Walker friend in this movie kind of sucks, but like I'm cool with you. And then she ends up being gets in a relationship with Cameron's friend Nisha, kind of thing. And it's like, so I kind of like that they're at least the Freddie Prinze character, in this one had a companion that was with them the whole time. Like he didn't lose everything. I kind of liked that aspect, but there's the acting in this is, I remember your anal joke scene was she says something like she wakes up and she's like, my bum is so sore. It was messy. Someone's like, context, please. Yeah, I think that could have been with a good director, and a good actor, could have been delivered well. Like there's a joke that was similar to that in in Daredevil. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they have some like double entendres that work. Like you can say something that's overly raunchy and say it deadpan because you don't mean that and get it, but like they just didn't deliver. And then there's a point where when they're singing at the party, they're singing, I don't know what song they're singing, but the friends are singing a song and it's absolutely terrible. And the DJ is like, well, this fucking sucks. Let's get Paget up. And she sings Katy Perry. And all these people are like, oh my God, why is she going to go to college? She can just go straight to Vegas and get a residency. And then like this happens throughout the movie. Like every time a dramatic thing happens, instead of just letting it hang and be dramatic, they would show like an Instagram live video and show her like subscriber count moving up in real time as she does something that's heartwarming, kind of thing. And it was just like, and then it's because he gets up on stage and starts singing with her, and he's a wonderful singer too. Why the fuck would he know a Katy Perry song when he's like bashing all this shit?
One of my notes is like, why would the Katy Perry song be the thing that does it for him?
Right.
Why didn't she go up and sing a Ramones song or something?
Right. And so he goes up there and sings with her, and like the Instagram video goes way, way up. And like the other thing that happens is every time something happens where her score goes up a little bit or her Instagram followers go up, the Kardashian character calls her like, hey, you're almost back up to where you were. Like you're almost going to get your thing back. You're going to get your sponsorship back. And it's always also at a moment where Addison Rae's close to telling the guy what's going on. And so she gets this little like carrot to go back to like being a selfish person kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, weird.
The Kardashian character is so funny too. I guess they know that they're doing this with her, but she's so like manipulative and abusive. She's like, "Hey, what's up, you stupid bitch? You're going to get, back in our good graces if you just do this thing. Anyway, fuck you. Love ya. Bye." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's like the who's that SNL chick that's on the Tim Robinson show?
I have no idea.
Have you watched I Think You Should Leave?
I've tried. I hate it. Absolutely
dude,
hate
it's
it.
so good. You're missing out, man.
I've watched 3 full episodes, and I just think every sketch goes on way too long, and I just really don't like that guy.
Funny. That's so funny. I feel if you hadn't said that, I would have guessed that you would like it.
My friend Dustin, he has sent me like 4 or 5. Dustin used to be a host on the show. Sent me like 4 or 5 clips, and I'm just like, I'm on board for like, they're 7-minute clips, and I'm on board for like the first minute and a half, and then I'm just like, this needs to fucking end.
That's so funny. All right, well, back to this movie. I think we can wrap it up, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're pretty much done.
I was going to end on a good note, so this is the good note. This movie had a few moments that were funny or whatever. Overall, it's pretty shallow and forgettable. But I will say, the little sister. Oh, we didn't even talk about Kieran Culkin in the first movie.
Not really. He's just Kieran Culkin around. He's great.
He's fun. He's Kieran Culkin around. So the little sister that's taking that role in this new movie is Isabella Crevetti.
Mm-hmm.
And as like forgettable as this movie was, she gives a speech at the end to Tanner that gets him to like give Addison Rae another shot. And that's the first time in this whole movie that I like felt anything. Like she kind of crushed that.
She was good.
That little monologue.
She was probably the best in this. Like I've just got
for sure
a couple little.
I was watching that and I was just like, oh, this chick is going to get a bunch of work off of this.
I hope so, because she wasn't so bad. Like I just want to end this on like everything that the other movie did that was like iconic, like the reveal of her coming down the stairs and being absolutely gorgeous. Like the reveal of this, of like the guy in his makeover with the haircut and coming out in the suit and everything. Like, it's just like he comes out and like the sister's like, "Oh man, if you weren't my brother, I would think you're hot." Like there was just no weight to it. No gravitas to that scene. And like, that's something that's iconic. Like everyone can picture Rachel Leigh Cook walking down those stairs in that red dress.
Yeah.
Nothing. Then they do the big dance at the end of the movie. And this, like, there's a twist because originally it was supposed to be one big dance. And Mathew Lillard, as the principal, was like, "Man, we've got some weird rituals at this school." But it turns out, like, the best friend, who is also the enemy, decides that she's going to create her own dance team. So now there's 2 dances, and they're supposed to be separately choreographed, but it's like a dance battle that's perfectly choreographed between the 2.
Yeah. And
then, like, Nisha, who's, like, super anti, pop, culture, not pop culture, but like she's not like Team Spirit or anything like that. Yeah. She's in the dance. Like, when did she have time to learn the dance and everything? Like, it just it falls flat. And then, but it ends with Mathew Lillard just being a blast, like making fun of all the students, saying that he really wants to hit the boyfriend who cheated on Addison Rae, but he can't because he's a student. But maybe when he graduates, oh wait, he's not going to graduate, kind of thing. Like. He had some great lines right at the end, and I'm like, man, he's too good for this movie.
Yeah, I agree. This movie also, I feel like, built up a lot of goodwill for me in the last like 10 or 15 minutes. It kind of redeemed itself. And then, the dancing scene aside, I was like, all right, whatever. That was fun. It's ending on a good note. That counts for something. And then literally the very last shot of the movie is the 2 of them
getting their tattoos
that says "loser," and it's like, okay, why is that the last thing you want me to see in this movie?
Because they had to end it with like him getting naked from the original movie because that was the bet.
Yeah, it was stupid.
And you kind of tease this, but there's a speech in both movies at the end, and I definitely think it's better in the original. Like the dad gives a speech to Lainey and just like, "I know a lot of people give you shit because your dad's a pool man, but like I own my own business. I'm my own boss. I can take care of my kids. I own my own house. Like, why are people shitting on me? Like, that's the American dream and I'm living it." In this one, she just kind of is like, "Yeah, I've been kind of ashamed of who I am for years and I've been lying to everybody." And which is weird because she seems to make a lot of money off her Instagram shit. Like, I don't understand why. They set it up like she's super successful. She's been paying her mom's bills and everything, but her mom also has to work really hard to be a nurse, and she's ashamed that she's been ashamed of her mom, kind of thing. It's like it was everything. It was trying to be that same speech, just wasn't good. Like it just kind of is like, this is supposed to be your redemption, but it's just basically you telling everyone you were kind of a shitty person for 4 years and lied to them.
Yeah.
So it's not a good movie, but I expected a lot more because when I saw that this was being directed by Mark Waters, I thought this was gonna my expectations got lifted a little bit when I saw he directed it, and I was just like, how is the movie directed by somebody who's never directed a movie before so much better than the guy who directed Mean Girls?
Yeah.
I just don't see how the guy who made Mean Girls made this movie.
Yeah, man. I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of that probably is the script, the writer.
Yeah, it's the same writer too, though.
Not as Mean Girls.
Not as Mean Girls. No, that's fair.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're right.
That's what I'm saying. I think a lot of it is having a good script, and probably just getting lucky with good actors.
You know what I think? The other thing, I just remembered this. So Arlie Fleming Jr. wrote both. And they mentioned that he was brought back in to like make it more hip after M. Night Shyamalan did another pass. So he wrote it, M. Night Shyamalan did the pass, and then he cleaned it up again. He wrote this one. It's 20 years later. So like
M. Night Shyamalan probably could have done a pass on this one.
Yeah. So Arlie Fleming Jr. is 20 years older, probably is nowhere near as hip as he thinks he is. Because there's a point where she says, Addison Rae's like, do you want me to SMS you this message? Nobody says that.
I mean, this movie seems to have a pretty good working knowledge of TikTok and how how influencers get paid and stuff. I mean, it's not like super inside baseball, but it all made sense as I was watching it. And that's generally not something that people who got famous for writing a movie 20 years ago still understand, you know? I don't know how old this guy is.
Yeah, I don't know. But there's just a few things that were like, why is that line in here?
Sure.
It's not a good movie. It's not terrible. Like it's probably exactly what you expect, but I just don't know who this movie's for. I don't understand why you brought Rachel Leigh Cook in and Mathew Lillard, unless you were trying to get people our age in to watch it. Why not just make it a sequel or something? I don't know. Like it's odd that they're in it.
I mean, that doesn't bother me. I think it's fine that they're in it. I think it's a nice nod to the other one. I don't think it needs to be a sequel because the other movie doesn't need a sequel. One. Yeah, there's no other story to tell. So I think that's okay. I think it just is ugly, lacking in story,
shameless,
and like bottom of the barrel casting choices.
Yeah, it's just I don't know what they thought this was going to be or what their goal was. Like, what was their best case scenario for this movie? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like this,
their best case scenario is that there's a pandemic and people are forced to watch whatever's on Netflix.
I don't know. I have no idea what the budget is of this movie. I imagine it wasn't very high, and I imagine
I heard that it was like $20 million.
No fucking way. This does not look like a $20 million movie.
I mean, kind of does to me.
I mean, you look at what Blumhouse does for half that. This doesn't. That's insane. If they spent $20 million on this, where the fuck did that money go? Who made the money? Because they got all that money back in product placement.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Man, that actually pisses me off if that costs $20 million to make. But Rotten Tomatoes on this is like 33% for critics and like 29% for audience. I was surprised that the Rotten Tomatoes for the original one, it was like 44%. 41% critic, 55% audience. The audience score surprised me on the original one because when we covered this on Ruin My Childhood, it was one of our most listened to episodes, and it was also one of the ones we got the most fan engagement on when we asked people what they remembered. So I was surprised to see such a low score for the audience on this one. But
I just did a Google search for He's All That Budget, and the first result is $20 million.
Damn, I looked for it earlier and I couldn't find anything. That's $20 million is fucking stupid.
Hey, I just typed He's All That Budget into Google and it came up with the answer.
That's insane. That's fucking dumb.
I mean, listen, man, it's expensive to make movies. It costs money. Even if you're not getting great. I don't know. I don't want to insult any crew members.
I never blame crew for something like this. This is always producer, director, just getting people behind who don't have a clear vision.
There are studio heads that were involved in this movie that did not do their job.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I agree. Fuck, this was a bad movie. Now I'm saying don't watch it. You know exactly what it's going to be. It's not worth watching, honestly. But do I think the original one could have been remade? I get it. You know, it's an iconic movie. It's something easy. It's Pygmalion. It's My Fair Lady. And it's iconic in its own regard. I get making it again, but this, no.
So 3.5 stars for you.
No, I give it like a 1.5.
Neil Minow from RogerEbert.com gave it a 3 out of 4 stars.
Jesus, what an idiot.
She wrote, sweet little end of summer sorbet with appealing young performers and a script that refreshes the original without overdoing it.
Nope. Wrong.
You'll be pleased to discover the entertaining remake has its charms. It actually is all that for the most part. That's
it's funny
Michael
that you mentioned Roger
Ordonia from the Los Angeles Times.
Roger Ebert's old. You mentioned Roger Ebert, right? Did I hear that right?
From RogerEbert.com.
Yeah. So the original one was the last film to be reviewed in print by Gene Siskel.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Bummer.
Yep. All right. Let's wrap this bitch up. Where can our listeners find you, bud?
Sorry, 1 second. Just let's rewind it for just 1 second. It is interesting to note that the cinematographer is John Gulsarian, who also did Candyman for Nia DaCosta that just came out. Same cinematographer.
Oh, wow.
And he also did An American Pickle.
I almost watched that the other day.
So, like, the cinematographer knows what he's doing. These other movies are fantastic.
Yeah, it's just the director didn't have a vision, or the
looking.
director just didn't let the cinematographer do what they needed to do.
Yeah.
They probably were just like, let's just set these up for medium shots. Let's have everything, fairly wide. And because there are a lot of pretty wide shots in this, they're just like, let's just get everything and try to do as little takes as possible.
The lighting is really the thing that gets me. Anyway,
Ugh.
we're done with the episode. I'll come back to that if I find out anything interesting.
All right. Where can our listeners find you, bud?
I'm on Instagram at Dyslexic, DYSAlexIC. I'm on Twitter at Polishi, but I've been spending most of my time creating content for TikTok. So go check that out. That is at Polishi. And you can follow along with the movies that I'm watching on my Letterboxd at Polishi. Letterboxd, please endorse us.
And you guys can check out everything that's MDXpods related at MDXpods.com, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all at MDXpods. If you want to reach the show, you can call the phone number in the description, or you can shoot us an email at mdxpods@gmail.com. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks.